In the last few weeks, the Ghanaian economy has been experiencing massive improvements from the appreciation of the cedi against the dollar and other major currencies to the reduction in fuel at the pump. Well, the Ghana Union of Traders Association and the Ghana Private Road Transport Union responded positively, asking their members to reduce prices, and they are first to. Others are blaming rigid downward movement of prices and are also buying time. All of these are expected to impact the current hyperinflation positively and bring some much needed relief to Ghanaians. Tonight, the big question remains whether the recent developments are signs of good times to come and that the economy is on the mend, or just a blip in an otherwise unabated downward spiral as growth slows today, as announced by the Statistical Service and rating agency Standard & Poor's sinks our rating further. To help me do this conversation, and in studio already, is a man that I have imported from the United Kingdom, who hardly steps in the Republic of Ghana, Dr. Sharif Mahmood Khalid. He's an assistant professor of accounting and financial management at the University of Sheffield in the United Kingdom. I hope you are doing well, Doc. We will also be joined in the course of this conversation by a senior fellow of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, Dr. Saeed Boachi, should be joining us later on. And from the very people who have been engaging this economy and running parts of it, Joe Jackson of Delex Finance will also be joining the conversation. You can also join us via the various social media means, but we can commence our conversation. That question is what I'm asking everybody today. Yep. We have seen the cedi doing well, quite in the last few weeks, quite well. I mean, some of the best performance we've seen the cedi get in a very long while. Yeah. We've also seen that fuel at the pump is on the downward spiral. Many people really think that that's a lot of good news. Yep. We heard the GPRTU say that they have reduced transport fares by like 15%. And also some members of GUTA, the traders, have been given the indication. In fact, just today, we were told by the Second-Hand Dealers Association, especially the clothing area. And I was told not long ago that in 2020, the whole world, we were the largest importer of second-hand clothes. But they are also reducing price by at least 30%. Yep. Others are giving excuses. Some said it's when they bought the goods and all of that. They've been giving some of those excuses. The big question here is, what's happening to the economy? We know that we have a debt restructuring program currently underway. Yeah. We extended the date for people to buy into government's program, the voluntary, which appears to be compulsory. Yep. People are supposed to buy into that program. On the other side, though, we have just announced that we are putting on hold the payment of the interest to all of our external, debtors in ways that some have feared is what led to the S&P's downgrade. What is happening to the economy? Are we on the path to recovery, or this is just one of those instances where it's just about to get worse?
Well, I think basically if everyone will be honest with what is happening, you'd see that in all of the issues you enumerated in studio, you'd realize that you couldn't back any of them with a point to say, okay, the central bank did X, Y, Z, right? The state institutions such as the finance ministry did X, Y, Z, and this is what is strengthening it. So we're just at the mercy of a market, a swing. So it's just a pendulum, and where the pendulum goes, then it's a positive, we enjoy it. If it's a negative, we enjoy it. But there's no concerted effort in the front line, unless, of course, government is yet to publish that, to say that this is what it is. So it's a very difficult question you seem to ask me, to say where the economy is going. But we all see where it's going. It's just enjoying from the blips and bumps of the economy. Right, if it comes on and a great high, we enjoy it. If it comes low, but there's something fundamentally here that we need to take note of. Right, you mentioned the unions, the GPRTU, at the pumps, at the petrol stations, and the likes of that. This is fantastic. That what it means is that there is support for the economy. What it means is that these unions are ready to get the economy to survive based on what it's happening. How is government taking advantage of this to consolidate on this goodwill to actually drive this through? But as you would see, you have external debt and you have domestic debt, which are almost the same. So in debt restructuring and swapping, which one are you going for? Are you concentrating on domestic or are you going external? Right. So that puts us in a very precarious situation. Let's say probably external was 10%, domestic probably 30%, then we can handle. But here's the case, you have a 28, 26%, almost equal. So where is the focus? Right, what has the central bank done in the last couple of months actually to get the dollar stabilized? Except to act as a digital currency board for the forex market in rates that are not reflective of the market.
Okay.
Because we all know what the central bank advertises is not really what we transact with when we go to the forex bureaus and the various end user points.
And they've been quite forceful with that. They've been giving us sometimes 2 different reviews in a single day, which was very surprising.
Yeah.
I mean, the president has said categorically earlier this week, right, that nobody can say the economy is on an autopilot. Government is taking prudent steps to drive down the depreciation of the cedi, for example.
What are the prudent steps? They should bring them out and we engage.
Are they not pumping more dollars into? So, for example, if you suspend debt service, if you suspend the interest payments to all your external debtors, you may have some dollars to pump into the system.
And what it means is that you get downgraded by the ratings agencies.
Which is what just happened.
Yeah, because you're not going to get to service your debt. And what happens when you do that? You can go back to the capital markets. So let's take this simple scenario. You're an individual, right? You have a credit card. You spend maybe to 20% interest, right? You go pick another credit card, take an overdraft, take a loan. All of this with different percentage points. What will your credit ratings be?
A very terrible one.
Very terrible one. So as a country, that's where we are. So how are we on the path to growth? And what I expected the central bank to do is that before we started, we had reserve depletion sometime last year, right? Which was scary. Have we plugged that hole, the black hole that got sunk in our reserves in the central bank? That's what we should be doing.
So you don't think that this is a prudent step to pump in more dollars to stabilize the currency?
Are they really pumping dollars in?
That is what they say they are doing.
What's the evidence of that? Through what?
The argument is that
through what instrument?
For the first time in a very long while, government actually was able to provide enough dollars during the auction of dollars, which the Bank of Ghana started quite a while ago. Said they were able to provide enough for the first time and meet the demands that were on government right from the beginning.
Did you watch the international market and the dollar performance in the last couple of weeks? The dollar is underperforming.
Okay.
Across board, internationally.
Yeah, it could be one of the factors. Right.
And what is happening? Actually, one of the big factors here, and which I thought we could have taken advantage of to tame the cedi if actually we had the strength to do that. So the dollar across board in the last couple of weeks has been underperforming on the international market to major currencies and other currencies. So what is happening is that this has been an attempt by the US Fed to actually bring down inflation hikes.
Okay.
So what happens? Investors shift from that, right, to more riskier currencies. And when that happens, we're just going to have an appreciation.
Is that?
And that's an evidence. And you look to China.
Is that sustainable?
That's not sustainable.
Okay, you were making a point.
That's not sustainable, right? Because the US would not also want to have the dollar fall for such a very long time because they'll do whatever they can to have it because it's among the leading trading currencies. We look at the renminbi in China, right? Because of COVID lockdown and huge restrictions, it was really underperforming. Rules have been relaxed. It came up much stronger. So it joined the fray of stronger currencies. Definitely is going to affect the dollar because of its competitiveness on the market. So the fundamental question I'm asking is that the central bank should enumerate what it has done in the last couple of weeks. We engage with that. The finance ministry, which are the managers of the economy, should enumerate what they've done in the last couple of weeks to actually get and we'd engage with that. But we just don't speak in a vacuum.
The options that have been referenced includes the very fact that we have commenced a domestic debt restructuring program, that we have given a staff level agreement by the IMF, and so all of those are positive signs that are signaling to the other areas.
I think that we all get the impression of the staff level agreement wrong, right? What impact has a staff level agreement got to do with impacting positively on an economy? When it comes to IMF engagement, very minute. Why do I say this?
Okay.
Right. A staff level agreement is like a principal in agreement where you go to a bank for a loan. A bank can give you a principal in agreement and you may not get the loan, or you may get it. But there's a fundamental bottom line here, which is what? We're dealing with a sovereign nation and we're dealing with the IMF. The IMF's template never fails. It's not risky that it might not fall through or something might happen. So the very moment we advised that we were going to the IMF, any watcher or serious watcher of the market who wants to take the IMF engagement to make any serious decisions would have made that. They won't wait for a staff level agreement to do that.
Okay.
In any case, what is the content of the staff level agreement? Right? because we need to know the nitty-gritties. It's not the deal. The deal must be ratified by the board or the executive board of the IMF. And what the deal or what the board says is final, right? So we can go back with a basket of cases and it get rejected. So even if we had reached that level of the executive board and you say, okay, well, some ingredients have come up. But mind you, the watchers of the market have their insiders everywhere. They could have preempted what it's going to be. For all you know, they already know what the deal is. But many of us would know. So the market is often ahead. So I don't see how an IMF deal is being peddled, or maybe a staff level agreement is being peddled as a positive sign, because we all know this money was going to come in. To an extent. Tell me, in the history of the IMF.
Was it coincidence, though, that just when all the good things appear to be happening at the same time?
In the history of the IMF,
yes.
Tell me which deal or engagement that was ignited and didn't go through.
I can't recall anybody.
So it tells you the kind of risk anyone will approach an IMF engagement, especially so with a sovereign state.
No, what you're saying is that we should know the details of this SLA, but the ones they are put out there, they're very detailed, including the fact that they would need assurances from our people on our debt restructuring program, which may include that people are bought into it and are willing to go along with it, before they can move it to the next level of getting the approval that's required.
Okay, so I'll tell you something fundamentally. If the staff level agreement was that sensitive, who, on the very week of getting a staff level agreement, decides that you're going to default on your loan payments? Would that not have a negative impact on the staff level agreement?
Could it also not be a part of the agreement?
It could be, and I'll tell you that where it reflects. It says, if you read the ministry statement, excluding multilateral loans. And what are the multilateral loans? IMF, World Bank, the Bretton Woods institutions.
Yeah. Now that's interesting. Now, I want to ask this question because of the only bad news we have heard this week is Ghana's foreign currency ratings being loaded to SD. On the suspension of commercial principal and interest payments. Basically, Ghana says in the interim, we are doing this so that we can re-engage. So until we have an arrangement, a form of agreement with our lenders, we will stay the payments. This is to make sure that we are on the right path. Was that in and of itself a good decision?
How could it be? Because debt to GDP, 84%. 70% plus of our taxes, right, goes to service debt. So in this case, where is the plan and structure to prove that we've got the wherewithal and the financial strength, right, to re-engage? On what template, on what terms? Where would that source? Are we going to increase taxes? Right, so these are the signs we have to see to have confidence in the economy.
When the deputy minister mistakenly gave out what government's plan was,
mistakenly.
John Kumar told us that we are looking at a 30% cut in both principal and interest when it comes to the external debt.
Yes.
If that is what we are considering, is it a step in the right direction?
Well, definitely, if there's haircuts, there's going to be casualties, and it's going to affect the economy negatively. And what it means is that borrowings or going back to the capital markets will be problematic.
But currently, it doesn't look like we'll do so anyway.
I don't know if they will do that. But why is it that all of our recovery plans are a postponement of our debts? How is that a solution? Because we are deferring debts here. We are postponing debts here with all of these introductions that are being brought to the fore. What are the managers of the economy telling us?
No, there's a question that I was asking about what the suspension itself means, which is a very temporary measure anyway. And whether or not the suspension is in and of itself a good sign for our economy, and we can attribute some of the current happenings to it.
No, I'm wondering what impact it will have, given the debt portfolio we hold, right? Given the taxes that we raise and what we use to service debt. It will just be a blip, a drop in the ocean if there's any impact whatsoever.
But until
and how does that bring in investor confidence?
That we have solidly gotten finally an IMF program. Then secondly, we have actually arranged with our creditors who have a sustainable debt restructuring plan.
By deferring our debts, right, and postponing our debt payments, right, and that again is a sign for downgrades in the future.
Should we really care about the downgrades? People say we are already down. What's the point, though?
No, well, if we keep going down and down, what it means is that we get into bankruptcy levels, because there would come a time nobody will touch us as a sovereign state. Because the only advantage here...
Would necessarily ever happen? Mindful of
That could happen if we keep
the
going.
things we have in the offing,
Yeah.
IMF deal, debt restructuring, all of those. Are those not the path to the recovery? That
Well, it depends on what we do with the IMF money. It depends. We can have a recovery, a good recovery, if we actually reinvest and invest it properly.
I get you. Well, now the point I was asking about, the real impact of this downgrade.
Yeah.
Some have concluded that.
But fundamentally, right,
Yes.
I think that this government has abused every public sector rule of emergency funding on the books, right?
What do you mean by
Such that we are having a bear trade now. You don't even, because we are being engaged now because we are just a sovereign state, right? Because they know that sovereign state is quite difficult to default. But when you now start to default and defer debts, what happens? We run out of time in which we could buy for emergency borrowings and the likes of that. And mind you, look at where we have. Since the government took over, we've been on the bond market, swimming.
Yeah. Performing very well.
Yeah, but I mean, who runs an economy on bonds for 8 years, or close to 8 years, or 6 years? Let's put it that way. Who does that?
Where were the options going to come from? We really had to raise money. We
Yeah.
had big ticket programs to do, and we needed to make sure that
Well,
we
the
fund
big
them.
ticket programs had no funding. If they have no funding, they can't take off. Unless, of course, they can repay themselves or reservice themselves. And that's prudent spending, responsible borrowing.
That's why we called it smart borrowing.
Well, that's not, is there something like that? I would say responsible.
Yeah.
Because you go to the capital market responsibly.
Yeah.
Because you don't go for the money, use it for what? Can we account for the last COVID loan we went for from the IMF? The 100+ million.
This is 2020 or 2021.
Yeah, but can we account for it? What investment went in? Because COVID has been a headline excuse, right? We went for some money. We keep saying we've been to the IMF 17 times. This government has been to the Bretton Woods institution twice in its tenure. We went for IMF and the World Bank, and we are now engaged with the IMF.
Yeah, we know of the World Bank loan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is probably about 30+ years. If you and I were to bear kids now, what it means is that our kids were to marry, we could have our grandchildren being affected by that.
Interesting.
So these are the impacts of some of these.
Did we borrow too much? The Deputy Minister of Finance admitted
Hooray,
that-
did you ask this?
The Deputy Minister said perhaps that's one of the things that we did that we should be looking back on and saying that this was a mistake.
And how do you rectify that mistake? Go back to the market?
Yeah, so that we put our economy on the right pedestal, don't you think so?
But how do we do that? You don't think we need to build a local portfolio where we can cut down on certain expenditures to try to see how we can revamp the economy locally,
But when we
put confidence in
But
it?
when we cut down on expenditure, we are really reducing growth rate.
No, how are we? Because there is some needle expenditure that needs to go off.
Because
and now is the time to face
Okay,
and cut them.
we will come to those.
Because, I mean, those stick and plaster solutions of saying you're cutting emoluments of Article 71 office holders,
Yes, yes.
what does it do? How much does it bring to the pool?
No, they've not been able to quantify that. Because
Yeah, I think that they should quantify
No,
it
they've
and bring
not
that.
told
Yeah,
us
because
exactly how much
if you're not able to do that, then we're just speculating. And a government does not need to be speculating when in crisis.
Now,
Quicksand.
yeah,
Because you need confidence at every move you make, which is why I'm quite disappointed in the central bank's approach to all of this. As I said, it's become a digital currency board of the forex market, churning out rates, which is a good thing. But what happened to the black hole that was created a few months ago in terms of our reserves? That's a big confidence we need to know. Tell us what you've done about it. Where are we now in a state? Let's have that press release.
Now, one point that you've been making, I need it clarified. Yeah. Are you saying that the very good things happening to the city today, they are not the direct involvement, direct action, direct fiscal or monetary role of government, and more importantly, the people in charge of monetary policy, that's the Bank of Ghana?
Ray, what are the monetary policy issues that the bank has spelled out in the last 2 weeks or so to say this is what we're doing to arrest the dollar?
Say they have been clamping down on the black market. They've actually been pumping dollars into the system.
Yeah.
They've actually made sure that the right people get the dollars. They've taken the monies, or they are not prioritizing.
And what
Those who
happened to the
engage in
pharmaceutical?
imports of
What happened to the
specific
pharmaceutical
products?
sector? What did they talk about?
No, they said they didn't have dollars. But, I mean, that was previously, right? Is it not that?
Have they changed their stance on that? Because pharmaceutical, very key, right? Health is important. Health is cash. Health is king. And you're cutting out that kind of a funding approach to that. How is that prudent?
No, but they actually said a couple of days ago that they are looking at the possibility of reducing the price of these products, the pharmaceutical products too.
How are they going to do that?
Because
they are looking at, and what are the measures?
Considering it, because
and what are the measures?
Everybody to go through that process.
Yes, what are the measures?
Measures
they are putting in place. You say they are considering. What are they?
Yeah. All that they told us is that they are really going to drive down.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. They are churning out currency rates. Yes. They should churn out the policy.
Oh,
issues.
okay, the central bank here.
Yeah, the central bank here, and whoever is doing anything. And we can engage with that. Until that, we'll be speculating and speaking in a vacuum.
I get you. So you do not think that when the president of this republic says, no, it's not in and of itself an action that we are not controlling.
Yeah.
It is due to government's prudent action. That's what
if the president says that it is due to government prudent action, I expect you to say A, B, C, Z are the prudent actions that we've put in place, and this has tamed the dollar to the cedi.
Yeah.
Have we had that?
And you don't think meeting the requirement for Forex is one of them?
When you say in what terms?
As in like the regular.
But why are we reducing all of this, our financial situation, to Forex?
No,
when there is a bigger... No,
I get you.
Yeah, why are we reducing it to Forex?
It's one of the big issues that came up. And
yeah, but there are a lot of issues happening within the economy that we ought to focus on rather than just reduce it to currency and Forex issues. That tells us...
So that people see when there's an improvement in the exchange rate.
Yes.
The very concerning almost 15 or 16 cedi that we had,
moving
down to about 7 or 8, depending on where you are sourcing this information. Okay, central bank says somewhere around 8 anyway. Yeah. So moving down to that, some say it's a very important development.
Yeah, it's 8. And when you go to Forex Bureau, what do you get?
Or they have a different figure, I mean, sometimes some of them.
Yeah, so it tells you how grey or unregulated the market is.
Yeah. I was also interested in your thoughts on the other things that the finance ministry says they had put in place. Beginning of this year, they listed a long list of those measures they have put, like controlling government expenditure in various forms. They called it the expenditure measures that government was supposed to use to drive down, including not recruiting people, all of these action. Are those the things that you expected to see go into the next year?
No, for me, if you just tell me in plain terms, vanilla terms, that not recruiting is fundamental to driving or stabilizing an economy.
Okay.
How does that happen? You ask me, whereas probably we need essential staff like doctors, nurses, teachers, and all of that in the classroom who would spend to grow an economy, and you say you're cutting that, then you're not doing much. It'll be counterproductive.
Okay.
Unless, of course, you say, okay, well, we're cutting down on maybe excessive staff that are not probably productive, that are not relevant to an economy. Then you can quantify that and say, okay, that goes off on the economy. This is what we're going to generate, and this is what's going to happen. Ray, in all of what is happening, pension pots are being touched, right? We're a country where pension poverty is endemic. And by what I mean by pension poverty is that we have individuals who retire, and they're even waiting for their lump sum to start to build homes. Which is woefully inadequate. Now that is going to be touched. And the pension funds appear helpless. In other economies, pension funds are acting to drive responsible investments because of the huge portfolios they hold. It only takes the unions to put up the fight.
Yeah.
So what are we doing?
They're still insisting on
so what are we doing in that direction?
Protest of a sort next week,
Who?
The government has said this quite clearly, that the very debt restructuring program, which it says is still something gets the people involved by 30th of this month, people should have signed on. And there's been a lot of pushback from the...
Is it voluntary?
Yes, that's what government says, actually. But if you don't sign on, you are in big trouble because the alternative is not something you would like.
Then I think if it's any jurisdiction, the law courts will be very busy. Yeah.
But if I don't have the money to pay, what's the alternative here?
But you have a contract, don't you?
Yes.
And if you don't honor a contract, what happens?
But there are difficult times. This is the Republic of Ghana we are talking about.
The
state versus your very...
No, but you have a contract, don't you?
And this is even domestic debt we are talking
about.
No,
but it's a contract.
Yes.
Right? And if our courts are fairer, they will decide.
That people should stick to the contract when they can't pay.
I can't say an outcome. I say there's a contract.
Yes. I know. I guess.
And yes.
No, I'm actually generally about what you think about our debt restructuring program.
What are the key details of it?
Oh, we've been told that, in all fairness, next year, no interest. The following year, 5%.
But that's what I'm saying is you are deferring the issue. And when you defer it, what happens? Time value of money. Are we not factoring that in here? You know the time value of money. So your investment becomes worthless at the end of the day. But yet you deferred.
But that's
the problem.
Sacrifice you are all making for the development.
Sacrifice. I've worked very hard, 10 years, 15 years, put in a pension pot, and because of someone reckless spending, I need to make a sacrifice for someone to fly business or first class to Dubai.
Government is not saying that we spend the money, that's why we are where we are. In fact, they have blamed COVID, they have blamed, what they call it, the other factors including Russia, Ukraine, which was also referenced in the S&P, what they call it, statement. Then they have also blamed the energy spending.
But Ray, have you journalists actually,
yeah,
right, done a chronology of events, right, of when the Russia-Ukraine war actually started, right? And at the point it started, right, the year, a month, where was our economy? Where was the currency? That's what I expect journalists to do, because we've been, throwing this all over.
What's the point you are seeking to make with that?
Yeah, my point is that we're already in this problem before we had Russia. Ukraine.
Oh, that point has been pointed out to government quite clearly.
Quite clearly.
Yeah, but it still disagrees, right? And there's no point dragging the further anyway.
Yeah, no, I'm just, so if you say fair enough, I'm not going to drag it.
In fact, we even told government that
right.
in 2019, the IMF and World Bank joined the sustainability report.
Yeah, stability report, yeah. There was evidence of it, high risk of debt. Yeah.
So those points
have been made.
Yes.
But in any case, is Russia-Ukraine over?
No, we still have serious.
Okay, so what about the currency change we had? Russia-Ukraine couldn't affect that?
It's because of prudent response, if I'm quoting.
And when did they start the prudent response?
More recently, I mean.
And what were they doing a few months ago?
I mean, those are conversations that I should bring in. No, we are being joined by Joe Jackson. Joe Jackson is a distinguished business executive and somebody you respect in this space. Mr. Jackson, you're welcome to UPfront.
Thank you, and good evening to all your listeners and viewers.
Now, I start this conversation by chronicling the last major events that have been happening in the economy, which includes some positive news about the cedi and the exchange rate compared to major trading currencies. If you put that one aside, we've also seen some improvement at the pumps, which was one of the biggest problems for our inflation since transportation was skyrocketing. Indeed, diesel and petrol are one of the top 5 major contributors to our inflation. Then the response came from GPRTU and also GUTA, that they are considering reducing the price of goods. Some of them are still staying in that corner. The question many are asking, especially when we have a staff level agreement, minus the recent development of downgrade further by Standard & Poor's, is the economy on the path to recovery? Mindful of what has happened in the last few weeks, are we seeing a very clear coast of better times coming?
Well, I'm not sure whether I can call it clear better times coming. I think what the famous words are that when you are in a hole, you stop digging. I think at this moment we have stopped digging in the hole. We've declared formally that we are broke. We've actually declared that we cannot pay our debtors. We've gone to the IMF for a negotiation. So at this moment we've stopped digging, and the hole hopefully is not getting better. It's not getting bigger.
Okay.
So things are kind of stabilizing. On the path to recovery is a bit more optimistic than I would describe it at the moment.
Okay.
There are several pitfalls ahead. There are several things we haven't finished doing. The domestic debt exchange has not been concluded. Our negotiations with the foreign domestic debt holders has not ended yet. So I would just say that we are cautiously optimistic that we are facing up to our problems and that things could get better. They could also get a lot worse before they get better. But for now, we thank God for every single mercy that comes our way. And we should appreciate all the good news that we are getting, mindful that we are not out of the woods yet.
There is some bad news too. I mean, Standard & Poor's decided to give us some further downgrade. some Ghanaians have checked out of the rating agencies and their ratings of our economy because it's very depressing. We've also just heard of the statistical service telling us that growth slowed compared to last year for the third quarter of this year. I mean, I'm not sure how we balance the positive versus the negative developments in the economy, but what does it all tell about where we are today?
Well, first of all, I can tell you that the Standard & Poor downgrade is actually quite meaningless. It doesn't change anything. We had lifted up our hands. We said we were broke. We had defaulted already. We had indicated that we're not going to be able to pay. A committee of our debtors of our creditors had been formed, and we're negotiating. So really, that downgrade by Standard & Poor's doesn't change. It doesn't move the dial. It doesn't change anything. So I don't think that should worry you or any one of us. That downgrade shouldn't give us any cause for worry. That our economy has slowed down is natural. We're facing high inflation. We're facing a sharp depreciation of the cedi, albeit with some recovery in the last few weeks. But is it surprising that there was a slowdown in the third quarter? Also not surprising. So really, the news, I discount the news, not because they are not important, but I discount it because the effect has already been felt, been weighed, been accounted for, and we are still moving forward.
Now, give me a second. Let me bring you Dr. Said Boakye and Mr. Jackson, because I need to also test these ideas across the table to make sure that we are on the same plate when it comes to what's really happening to our economy. Dr. Boakye, I've just enumerated the positives and the negatives happening in the last few weeks in this economy, starting with the downgrades and also the slow growth that we've just experienced or been listed by the statistical service. What really is happening now? Is it something we can say that we are on the path to recovery?
At this stage, recovery is not the right word to use.
Okay.
Yeah. After the COVID in 2020, 2021, we thought we were recovering. Growth picked up to about 5.4%. I was interviewed by many journalists. I told them the private sector is what was taking us through the recovery. It was quite resilient. It was doing well. But the economy was being weighed down by the public sector. Public finances was weighing down the economy. As far back as 2021, I was telling people that the economy was having the potential to crash from the perspective of the private sector, public sector. So indeed, it has come true. The private sector that was quite resilient in 2021, helping us to recover fast. The public sector has indeed caused the problem, in the sense that it was because the government could not afford over-borrowing, and for that matter could not afford to service its debt. That caused the downgrade, and the downgrade basically blocked the government access to the international market, and for that matter couldn't go in for the usual $3 billion at the start of the year, 2022. So there was shortage of foreign currencies, sending the cedi depreciation through the roof, which has affected inflation rate. And when you have such a situation, you know, private investors, private businesses find it difficult to be able to invest. You know, the value of your cedi now is different from the value of cedi tomorrow. How can you plan? How can you invest? And this has affected the growth rate. So as of now, you cannot talk about recovery. Let us see how things will settle, especially if you're able to get this IMF program, and then you can begin to talk about recovery. At this stage, we are talking about how the economy will finally settle, given what is happening in the macroeconomic front.
Now, I want to ask you this question because it's one of the biggest debates in the country. Even the president is concerned about it. Yes, we've seen that fuel prices at the pump on the decline. We've also seen the cedi performing quite well. Why are goods and services, why are the traders and the other groups, despite the indication from their leaders, refusing to show a similar reaction to the current positive news in the economy?
You see, at times people talk as if we are in a planned economy.
Yeah.
You see, it is competition that, determines prices. When inflation was going up, everybody had to spend more to be able to import. So cost of imports and cost of production generally went up, and businesses translated it into higher prices. Now prices are going down. People might have imported at higher prices. They might have produced at higher prices. So they are trying to still get some profit. But then over time, if the reduction in inflation, if inflation begins to reduce, if the city continues to strengthen, if you are a single businessman, you decide to sell at higher prices, you'll be competed away out of the market. So it will be in your interest to reduce prices. As of now, these have not reflected yet in cost of production and others. And for that matter, let's just give the market some time. If the city depreciation continues, appreciation continues, if inflation begins to come down, it will be in the interest of businessmen to reduce it. Nobody will tell them to reduce it. Other than that, you'll be competed out of the market. So let us allow the market to work. The same market that translated the inflation and depreciation of the city into prices, that market will also translate it into reduction in price. Nobody can force anybody here.
Till when?
Over time. In fact, in economics, we generally say prices are largely sticking downward. Going down is not an easy task. So over time, what is important is that the public sector has to be a part of the bargain.
Some say
the IMF negotiation has to continue. It has to succeed so that this appreciation, can strengthen, can be long lasting. If it becomes long lasting, then the environment will improve. As of now, nobody can say the city has strengthened permanently because it was based on good news that made speculators that were hoarding foreign currencies to offload and bring them to the market. Bring increasing supply of foreign currency. This is only coming from the speculative component. It is not permanent yet. But if we're able to get a deal, things will finally settle and we will be able to reach an equilibrium. We have not been able to reach an equilibrium yet. So let's all be patient.
I get your point, but do you think profiteering is happening in the system?
Do I think?
Profiteering is what's preventing traders and other people
There's nothing like profiteering. Let me tell you. In a market economy, there's nothing like profiteering. There's profiteering when you have a monopolistic power. If you are operating a market economy, continue to profiteer. If you're not supposed to do that, I'm telling you, you'll be competed out of the market. You understand that? So if you see, that's why, for instance, in Europe, in America, they try to ensure that companies do not have monopoly power. Of course, it's different over here. There are no rules governing monopolistic power. But if in absence of monopolistic power, there's a free market environment, there's nothing like profiteering.
Give me a second. Let me bring in back Mr. Jackson. Mr. Jackson, the recent decision to tell external debt holders that until we negotiate with you, your payments are on hold. What is the biggest contributing factor to this downgrade by S&P? That decision in of itself, was it a step in the right direction?
I would say yes. I would say yes, because that default was going to happen anyway.
Okay.
And by moving ahead of the curve and declaring a default that was going to come anyway, what we've been able to do is to take some pressure off the city. And I dare say that maybe, in any case, I'm not exactly sure, because we don't have enough empirical evidence to tell, but just maybe that contributed also to some appreciation in the city, because there was some pressure taken off the city because we don't have to pay the coupon and make the external debt payments. But at the point we had gotten to, that default was coming. So by acknowledging it and moving this, especially since it came after the agreement with the staff level agreement with the IMF, I would say that there's nothing wrong with that default at the moment. In fact, some will consider it, there's a school of thought that says that it was not just the right thing to do, but it was the positive thing to do.
That's interesting. And there's also a question about where we go from here. So we are still waiting to hear from the IMF. There's a massive revolt locally about whether or not pension funds, for example, should be included in the local, or if you like, call it the domestic debt restructuring program. The people are up in arms. They will not settle for anything less than removing that. I am convinced that even within the ranks of SNIT, they are opposed to this because of the effect it would have on them. What can we do so that we conclude that and also get the assurance that the IMF staff will need to get us the deal as early as possible?
Okay, now, first of all, we can't pay our debt. We need time and space. Somebody has to pay for that problem. Now, we remember that this particular deal is because the government has sought to exclude treasury bills and individuals. Now, of course, the inadvertent effect is that corporates who have and individuals who are subscribing to collective investment schemes are in trouble. The pensioners are in trouble. The unit trust funds are in trouble, and so on and so forth. But somebody has to pay. What the government has not done right is that it did not engage enough. It was almost like a fait accompli, take it or leave it. But at the same time, it also admitted that it couldn't force you to do it. So what he needs to do is engage more, talk more, negotiate more, and then come to a deal. But whatever happens, it must do a deal before the end of the year, because there's a deadline waiting, which is we want to get the IMF approval done. Somebody has to pay. Somebody has to pay. And one of the things the government can also do to its bit is cut down on the size of government. It's not only pensioners and corporates who somebody has to pay. We are broke. We can't pay our debt. Somebody has to take up that slack. But let the government also do its part. Let it cut down the size of government. Let it get rid of all the ministers and appointees that we all deem unnecessary, so that it can show that it is also shouldering its burden. In fact, I dare say that all the unions and co who are negotiating should add this to the list of demands, that before we get to pay, you must also cut down the size of government.
What should, in fact, the pension seems to be the stickiest point in the conversation. What should happen to that? Can government exclude it, mindful of the contribution to all of this?
The challenge you have is that we can exclude pensions, but if you exclude pensions, somebody's going to have to take a steeper haircut. Either you're going to include other categories that you have excluded, like some individuals and also some treasury bills. But whatever happens, somebody has got to pay the price. And the government has to engage, negotiate, and I dare say even become a lot more humble than it has been at the moment. At the moment, the underlying tenor is take it or leave it. In fact, we had a deputy minister who said, you can, if you don't like it,
you're on your own.
Do your worst. That is not the right stance. You've got to engage. You're the one who has defaulted. It is the government of Ghana that borrowed. It is individuals that are going to pay. You've got to be humble, you've got to engage, and you've got to negotiate. But the bottom line is somebody has to pay.
Perhaps the last question I'm asking you is the market people's problem, which is why are prices on the market not coming down?
Oh, that's relatively simple to answer. If I bought goods when the market was at 15 cedis to $1, and it comes down to 8 cedis to $1 or 10 cedis to $1. Until I have sold those goods, I cannot cut price. Otherwise, I'm making a huge loss. At the same time, remember that this is a market economy. If the goods don't go and somebody goes to bring goods at a cheaper rate, they will undercut you and you might be stuck with them forever. So the traders are playing a delicate balancing act between the minimizing any losses they will have to take and also making sure they get rid of those goods before new ones come in at a new price level. In any case, as a trader, you have to look ahead and say, will the CD stay at 10 or will it go back up again? At this moment, I don't think anybody can make a full-grown prediction as to what the CD will be in a few weeks' time. All we know is that there's a lot of volatility. So it's a waiting game. It's a balancing act. If the traders cut their prices too early, they'll take a loss. If they wait too long, they'll take a loss. Volatility doesn't help anybody. These wide swings in the price of the CD doesn't help anybody. And we have to just wait and see what happens. But the prices are not going to change that quickly.
I'm grateful to you for your time this evening, Mr. Jackson. Let me come to you for final words. Dr. Said Boakye, before I return to the studio, all of this is geared towards something. You are saying it's too early to have a conversation on recovery. But what does the future look like for us?
It all boils down to the government's attitude. I always want to speak in terms of history. In fact, the Institute for Fiscal Studies was the first institution to call for debt restructuring. Nobody was talking about it. We were saying where the country had reached in terms of our debt service, the government needed to restructure. We didn't provide any details. What we thought is that under normal circumstances, the government will renegotiate with both domestic and external creditors.
Okay.
You see, there is something unfair going on over here. And IMF also has to understand that. The government came regarding domestic debt restructuring with its own plan, which is basically take it or leave it. But for the external debt, we can now see that there's a committee that has been put together to negotiate with the government and IMF, a tripartite, basically a tripartite, party to negotiate. But then the IMF is also, and the government, particularly IMF, is linking it to the completion of the domestic debt restructuring. And this domestic restructuring is basically has been imposed upon bondholders. A bond, is, like I keep on saying, is a legal instrument, two parties involved in the contract, and there should be a negotiated settlement. The government also has to take into consideration the financial health of the economy at the end of the day. If you are imposing all these things, so serious a haircut, it could have long-lasting implications for us. But even before I end, the government should also recognize that this is a whole fiscal adjustment program or problem. It is not only a matter of debt restructuring. Debt restructuring is needed because it is the biggest component of our expenditure. Nevertheless, there are other areas of expenditure sitting down that the government also has to look at. Indeed, if you look at the 2023 budget statement, when I look at it, I couldn't believe my eyes. In the middle of a very serious macroeconomic instability, serious fiscal consolidation is needed. But I look at this budget, 2023 budget, and the budget is expansionary. The government is even spending more. Deficit in the mid-year review for 2022 was 6.6%. The projected deficit now, when they brought the 2023 budget, is 7.2%, from 6.6 to 7.2. 2023 budget deficit is increasing to 7.7%. The government, other than interest components that it is negotiating to reduce, the government is even increasing spending. The government has to see that this is a complete fiscal adjustment. All expenditures have to be looked at. They are talking about the size of the government. Look, we heard from the minority that they are even planning to destroy the conference center and build a new one. In the middle of this, the government has to be serious and realistic. It is not about debt restructuring alone. Or too much debt taken out of the private sector domestically can create confusion for the financial sector. So it should be a holistic fiscal adjustment approach.
I'm grateful to you, Dr. Said Boakye, and I'm returning in studio because I need to wrap up this conversation. Yeah. So what I'm hearing from you is too early to actually have a conversation about recovery.
Yep.
And that we're still in very...
But I want the government to be bold to say we are doing X, Y, Z, so we can hold them to it. The unaccountability of their communications in what they are doing is not helping the situation and it's not putting confidence in the economy.
Why are prices not coming down? That's a key point to everybody. Why are the other people in the market not reducing their prices?
The point is you can't expect an immediate downward fall in prices. It's a market. You spend some money at a higher price to buy a good, you bring it on, you have it, you shelve it, right? So if the prices go down, you still have to get that stock off, which is why I'm really saying that it's a gesture of goodwill with all of what the petroleum unions are doing. Nobody does that. So what it means is that they're actually supporting the government. You're talking about pensions being removed from all of this. Pensions alone within the debt portfolio component, you look at 5%. That's massive, isn't it? So if it gets removed, what happens?
So you don't think that they'll be listened to?
Yeah, because it's a big component of it, right? I don't want it to be touched. But from the look of things, as you see, looking at the percentage of pensions. But if we want to really put real confidence, Senate or whoever it is, or the pension funds that have it, they should come out with a program and tell Ghanaians that, look, X, Y, Z of your pension pots have been invested in A, Y, Z. All right? So we've bought that. We've invested in X company. We've invested in that. The Golden Beach hotels are bringing A or whatever it is, or we restructure. So you put in a program of a confidence to say, okay, this is what we've invested in. Even if we are touched, right, within the next 5 to 10 years, this is the return on investment that we would have. That will be comforting enough.
Okay.
But nobody is doing that, and yet we are talking about let's not touch that, let's not touch that. What are the pension funds doing cumulatively in that regard as well? That is if it's going to be touched.
One of the main concerns is whether they can still pay the contributions for those who are actually going up in January.
Exactly. So that's why they need to come out with a program and put that confidence into the system. So when you talk about confidence, these are the confidence we're talking about. And pension funds should be driving that sort of responsible governance and investment issues and drives. So what are they going to do within the next couple of years in terms of their investments to have a good return on investment? If that is done, people are going to be comfortable. They say, okay, well, let's have it. Because whether we like it or not, we are there. We are at a crossroads. And we need to take action. And it looks like we have no option than this and the IMF. So we are torn between what? The devil and the deep blue sea. Yeah. Which path do we take? But it looks like we're going to take both paths, which has never happened in the history of this country.
Those are your final words. I mean, I don't know if you have anything else to add to it quickly before we go. Well, then I can finally wrap up on this conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining this day's edition of UPfront. We've been trying to find out whether the recent developments in the economy are signs of good times to come or just a blip which is likely to fade away anytime soon. I'm sure you have your thoughts on that. Many thanks to you for joining us again.